Hi, my name is Bob Franzoni. We're here doing the CATV show, and the CATV show is a show that we cover all perspectives of the Upper Valley, and we do sometimes monthly or weekly, or we're doing two in one day today, so this is a record for us. And we have two great guests here, and a repeating guest. He liked it so much he came back with another show. So I guess I have to introduce him, tell him first of all your position on the Dresden. This is actually called the Dresden School Board budget. And the Dresden School Board, for those who don't know in the viewing audience, although you should know, is made up of the Norwich and Hanover schools, which include the Richmond School, 6th, 7th, and 8th, yep, and the Marion Cross School. And the Ray School, I guess, is the Dresden School District also.
Well, the Ray School is actually a Hanover School District,
right. That's right.
And not part of Dresden.
And Marion Cross, Norwich is not Marion Cross. That's Dresden. Dresden takes the 7th through 12th graders of Hanover and Norwich.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we got that straightened out. President Carey?
Yes, my name's Kari Asmus, and I'm the chair of the Dresden School Board.
And how long have you been chair for?
I've been chair for 3 years now, and I'm going into my 9th year on the board.
Great.
Yep.
And I'm on the budget committee of Dresden, and I am serving in my 5th year, about to go into my 6th year on the Norwich board, which means I'm also on the Dresden board.
Now, are you a voting member of the Norwich board?
I am a voting member, yes.
To explain to the audience that, well, why don't you explain
Sure.
the numbers and how it works?
Sure. So there are 12 members of the combined boards, 7 from Hanover and 5 from Norwich, representing all of the board members of the Hanover and Norwich boards. One of the Norwich seats is non-voting, so we have 4 votes for the Dresden board. Although we have full participation rights in terms of discussion, there's no gag order, but when it gets to the voting, by the way it was originally set up, and Kari knows more about this than I do, the statute, but it was, I think, intended to be proportional to the populations of the towns.
Right, and we are required to have an odd number of voters on the board. Right. So if we had all 12 voting, we would not be in compliance.
Compliance, right. So either you had to add another member of the Norwich board to do that if you wanted.
Yeah.
I remember when I first got here that we were meeting the old Hanover High School gymnasium, and they used to nominate from the floor an at-large member.
Yes.
And I can't remember how many years that happened, but that used to happen, and everything's changed. Yeah. And the Dresden School District is, again, we said it, but historically wise, was the last law signed into. It's the last piece of law signed into law, by John F. Kennedy before he was assassinated.
That's what we've understood, and there is a copy of that bill framed at the Richmond Middle School. Should anybody want to go take a look at it?
Now, how many other interstate school districts are there? I know there's one up. Riverdale has one.
That is the only one that exists in the United States currently. There's a third one that's being possibly put together further north, up in the
Colebrook.
Yeah, Colebrook area.
Yeah. And it's interesting how that the Dresden School Board, sports-wise, chose to go with the Hampshire sports, and Riverdale chose to go with the Vermont Athletic Board for sports. So they play the terms Vermont, and Hanover plays sports in New Hampshire. So I guess they could choose, I guess. And so, anyways. That's just a little tidbit information. Yeah. I guess I want to talk a little about today about you mentioned the Dresden budgets and how you arrived at that and how it became the numbers. But first of all, I'd like to talk to you, what is so special about the Dresden district that is so special about the Dresden district?
Well, I guess I think that one of our hallmark traits is that we really try to have an educational program that's appropriate for each and every student, and that means constantly being on the vanguard for trying to find out what the best practices that will help us meet that goal. So this year, for example, we had a lot of discussion about how to best integrate technology responsibly into our program and how that could help different students in different ways, whether it would help top students boost themselves a little bit better, or reach to students that we're not currently reaching, or integrating it in student services for students with special needs.
What do you think some of your ideas was special about the Dresden district?
Well, I think they're a great reflection of our communities, and we have terrific students, we have great teachers, and we have some great physical facilities as well. When you bring all those three elements together, if it's properly managed and led, you can really achieve great education, and I think we're fortunate to have that in our towns.
And right now you're finishing up a principal search in Hanover High School.
We are.
And when's the decision going to be made?
We have a timeline of making a decision before district meeting on March 6th. Okay. So far we are sticking to our timeline. We have had 3 finalists, very diverse backgrounds.
I saw the names in the paper, yes.
In this past week. So it's been a very interesting process.
Right. And and Debbie Gillespie's been there how many years?
She has been the principal for the past 10 years, and before that she was Dean of Students for 5 years. So she's a 15-year veteran of our Dresden schools.
And that's going to be a tough loss, I think, for Hanover High School. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as is the principal leaving it in the Mary Cross School, too. Right. So when you're trying to lose good leaders, it's always tough. But hopefully new ones will come in and take their place. It'll be good, just as good. Going, Kate, making up the Dresden budget in this. Help me through this. And I'm going to repeat a lot of questions, Carrie. I'm sorry to ask it, but maybe ask to Carrie. And I said to paraphrase last time, you just are not handed a budget the second week of January by the Dr. Bass. Say, okay, can you vote on this? It actually starts earlier. So when does the Dresden budget really start taking effect?
The first part of the process really happens in the spring when we sort of debrief on how the previous budget went. But then come August and September is when the full board starts to engage and sets guidelines for our administrators of what parameters we would like to see a budget come in. And at that time we start to get public input from the finance committee about what seems reasonable. After the board does that little bit of work, the budget process goes into the buildings where staff and our administrators work very hard to find places where we can find economies, evaluate maybe things that we no longer need, what do we do need, how can we bring the new program in the most efficient way possible. The board kind of gets a sneak preview in December to make sure that we're still on track, and then in January is really the sort of full rollout with 3 meetings. Right. So that's the process, which ends in March when voters go to the polls and tell us what they think of that warrant article.
Okay. And the dates in March for the Hanover, I know we're not really talking about Hanover School District right now, but the Hanover town meeting is March, is what date?
Oh, well, the both
District
Hanover,
meeting.
I guess Hanover, Norwich, and Dresden all have this sort of 2-part process where you have one meeting where people discuss the warrant articles. For Dresden, that is on Thursday, March 1st in the evening at the high school. For Hanover, it's March 3rd, Saturday, and then I believe for Norwich,
it's March 5th.
5th
Correct.
is the discussion.
In the evening, Monday evening.
Yep. And then all 3 districts vote on Tuesday, March 6th, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Now, the question, I always saw this, I think it's hard to get people coming out at night. And I think it'd be harder on a Saturday. I mean, I know Norwich pre-town meeting, the Tracy Hall is jam-packed. It is full, to vote. I'm always pleased to see that people come out. My question is, why couldn't the Hanover district and Dresden district meet on Thursday the same night?
I think there was some question about not wanting to limit one discussion and then being able to advertise that the next meeting would start at a time certain. Okay. But you are certainly right. Saturday is a tough day to get people out. Maybe we need to bake a lot of pies. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Maybe we should go back to the original history of the town meetings where, in Vermont, and then town meetings Monday, March 5th, you couldn't work. You didn't have to work. They all required, and you couldn't stop at work or go to town meetings. And people got together and made pies, and it was a social all-day gathering. And some towns, I'm sure, in rural Vermont and New Hampshire, still do that, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So those are the key votes. Now, in the budget deliberations, there are certain things that you must have really liked to keep in and couldn't keep in, or so. What are some of the things that are new initiatives in the Dresden school budget?
I I think the biggest is some technology investments that we're making next year. For a couple of years, we have noticed that there's not sufficient support in terms of technology infrastructure, and I'm really speaking about people as well as equipment. But the people is the more expensive of the two. And so in the 2012-13 budget, we are adding 2 technology specialists in both the Hanover High School and the Richmond Middle School to address...
One in each.
One in each, yes, one in each, to address that deficiency. And we think that will go a long way toward freeing up some of the existing technology resources to really make a difference in the classroom, which has not been the case. You have to have the technology working, and so that is a full-time job in and of itself. But now to leverage that into the classroom experience, I think is the exciting part of it, and hopefully we can begin that to really gain some traction next year. We're doing that already, but I think with these resources, we'll make greater strides.
Right, and part of it is for a professional in the area of technology to be able to instruct other educational professionals, the teachers, on how to use technology in their classrooms effectively. But then there's also teaching students also how to use the technology. So there's 2 levels when it comes to the classroom, but then we also want to have effective use of technology in terms of tracking students over time, being able to use that data to see and be able to look back, what interventions did we try with this student 2 or 3 years ago? What was the impact of that? So we want to just be better at using technology at all levels.
Now, I know there's some discussion on the 7th and 8th graders all receiving iPads. I know that I've talked to you before that we're over to our summer place near Castleton, Fairhaven High School. All 7th graders get iPads in 7th grade. In the elementary school in Castleton, they don't get iPads, they get a lighter version. Not iPad Lite, but one that's less expensive. I know that recently McGraw-Hill, or Pearson, who bought out McGraw-Hill, they are loading everything on the iPads. The library in Castleton is thinking of adding iPads. I know in Wells, Maine, they give all the students laptops. I know where Dr. Bass kind of came from in Wyndham, New Hampshire, they all get laptops. And the idea that when they're home, that they can hitch into the school and do their homework if they're sick. And I know there's some talk about, so what was the resolution on the iPad situation in Hanover, Dresden School District?
It was a bit of a compromise. The board authorized purchase of 2 carts of iPads.
And how many?
So that would be 25 for each of the 7th and 8th grades.
So 50.
So 50 in total.
Okay.
So to take some steps along this line, but it wouldn't be a dedicated one-to-one machine. They would be, they could circulate amongst the classes. I think from my perspective, and from learning on the board, it seems very clear that this is the direction education is going to move. Some of the textbook resources are probably not there yet, but they're getting there. So it's a little bit of an exploratory year next year, and then I think we'll have to make a decision next year what we do from there.
Right. It really will allow our middle school staff the opportunity to develop their skills in having the appropriate use of this technology for 7th and 8th graders, because it's really complex. How do you use this responsibly? How do you make sure that if a student doesn't have anything but dial-up at home, or maybe they don't even have dial-up at home, how do you really make sure then that all students have sort of a level playing field?
And that's I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yes.
because I just attended a meeting in another town about internet. And a student didn't have the internet, and he got up, he or she, but that student got up, or the parent got up and said, my student's at a disadvantage. My student needed to do homework, he needed to do this for his class. I had to drive to Panera Bread for him to do his homework, or I had to go to a friend's house. So in this technology, if a person doesn't have internet, they are really at a disadvantage at home. And so how would you, maybe they can go to Panera Bread from Hanover, or go somewhere else, or Howe Library, and how the hours of Howe Library, or maybe can Hanover be open extra hours to allow students like that? I guess Etna does not have internet access? I'm not sure.
No, not really.
You're from Etna, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's actually a little bit beyond.
So if I don't know if you have any students in school, but really, if you do or you don't, it definitely will put your student at a disadvantage.
Right. So those are some of the reasons why we decided to go a little bit more slowly instead of having what was initially billed as a one-to-one, one iPad for every one student. We've gone to a sort of one iPad per seat. But it'll be based at the school, and I think that will be the best way to proceed.
Great. Now there also was an initiative coming up, and I had not followed budgets, and they have not been the Valley News, so so it must not be controversial. Although there was one letter I'll go to that I'll talk about later about the resource center for the English that would be for advanced English, that they'll have this reading or writing center. I'm not quite sure.
At the high school, there was a proposal where basically students would be help other students become great writers, and they are still going to go ahead with that initiative, but they decided that they could do it without any additional funding. So that's always great to see. And that's part of the process, is that a lot of ideas are floated, and then you start to say, well, how can we do this the most efficient way possible?
The letter to the editor talking about, and this is something you could explain, because I know the letter to the editor, taken in context, probably is right, but out of context. The teachers at Hanover High School are getting a 15% increase in salary, but I'm gathering, and he or she, I forget who wrote it, didn't include steps. But I'm gathering that's over a 2 or 3 year period. And so, and then I know that one of the comments you talked about, what about that comment, and what about the teacher salary? Are they up this year? Was there a contract signed this year? Let's do the...
all right, okay. So that I did read that letter, and that would be a teacher, what the increase would be over a 3-year period if it were a teacher that was fairly junior and was getting step increases in addition to the base increases. This current year, teachers received, because we did not have a contract, no teacher received a base increase, no teacher received a step increase, and so this year our teachers saw their paychecks shrink by virtue of the fact that the state of New Hampshire was requiring them to pay more for their retirement system, up from 5% to 7%. Their payments for insurance increased, etc. So this year, teachers saw their purchasing power decrease. That's why next year we were willing to negotiate a 2.62% increase on the base, which is the maximum that about 65% of our staff will receive.
So for the viewing public, steps are, they come in certain levels and they earn so many years of teaching, they go up a step straight up, or they go to like get a master's of 15, this when I was a teacher a long time ago, I taught at Thetford Academy, I went up, I didn't do anything in the normal increase, but if I wanted to work to my master's, I went up in the master slot.
Right, we call that a track increase, and we have about 160 FTE between the Hanover and Dresden districts of teachers. And of those 160 FTE, maybe 5 or 7 people will get a track advance in any given year. So very few people have that sort of movement that you're talking about.
One of the driving forces of any budget is school enrollment. And we're going to talk about enrollment, then we're going to get to how Vermont affects Dresden, because I think the two laws are different. So what's the projection? And I know we'll start with, and I asked Carrie this because maybe they tune in for this show and not the other show.
Right.
Reading in the paper, it looked like to me as a viewer, and I knew it wasn't true, that because the Hanover 5th grade had a lower numbers going to 6th grade, that decreased the amount of money that Hanover paid to Dresden district, and it sounded like it was made up by Norwich School, which I know is not right. So could you clarify that? And I'm sorry, I know we asked this question before, but could you clarify that for the public? And maybe you might want to answer that because you did before.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, you touched on enrollment, enrollment is dropping from 1,190 in October of this year that we just passed to 1,146. So it is down.
Does that include tuition students
slightly.
too?
That includes tuition students
Okay.
as well, an estimate. And so, but there is an issue for the budget with respect to tuition from Hanover to pay for 6th grade tuition, and that because of the number of kids, which Kari should talk to this because I don't know the situation there, the demographics for Hanover, but that's down unexpectedly, and so the amount of tuition revenue is going to be down unexpectedly as well. So that was revenues to the tune of $250,000 that's not coming in. So that increases not just Norwich's assessment, but also Hanover as well. So that,
and the paper came out in Norwich, and that didn't mention that.
well, there's a second impact, which is then the split. The total cost of Dresden are assigned to Hanover and Norwich in proportion to student population, and for a number of years, Norwich has benefited from, if you can use that, by it's a declining proportion of the total. This year, that's reversed, and it's going up, and so that means if we go from, say, 33% to 34%, that 1% increase, which doesn't sound like very much, but that's, say, 3% relative to what it was.
Okay.
So, that's an extra 3% that goes to Norwich, and that helps a bit on the Hanover side, but it's just the pro rata share.
Right. Yep. So what are the projections for the future of Dresden, the next 2 or 3, 4 years for the Dresden School District as far as numbers of students?
It's not a dramatic change going forward. So it's fairly flat.
Now, I heard that maybe numbers in the Hanover system are going down versus going up.
Yeah, particularly in the early grades. It'll take a while before I think you will see that in the at the higher levels of middle school and high school. But definitely, if you look at the birth data in our states as well as in our nation, and even locally, the small birthing facilities that are closing, if there aren't new housing developments that increase the overall population of our towns, I think, like many districts, Hanover will not be seeing certainly growing enrollments.
Now, do you have full-time kindergarten at the Ray School?
No, we do not.
You do not, okay. Okay. Then could that be one way to attract more students to the Ray School?
Right now demographics are such that any given family is going to have fewer children, including kindergartners in it, than they did 5 or 6 years ago. You really can't.
I know a lot of Vermont towns are going to preschool, going into the school system. I know Stockbridge have one as another town. We just talked about going to preschool, having preschoolers come into. And Stockbridge is a small Vermont rural town. The other thing is, how does working in the budget, dealing with the Vermont Act 60, and I'm not sure, I have not followed any law, I totally don't understand Vermont Act 60, and we're having the Commissioner of Vermont Education come down. Hopefully we'll explain that to everybody. But how, and I'm not sure what the New Hampshire law as far as equal, equity as far as education. How is that, first of all, let's deal with Vermont. How does Dresden deal with Vermont, within Vermont law? Because I'm certain you're aware of the Vermont law, and you had to be careful that, I guess, the 25% effect.
Well, so this year in particular, during budget season, the Norwich members of the Dresden School District pointed out that, we have an issue across the river that we are concerned about. Namely, that the Dresden expenditures, we were approaching, we were concerned about reaching that 25% cap, after which dollar for dollar there would be a tax in effect that would go to Montpelier. So we didn't want to be there, and so we pointed that out to the full Dresden board, that this was a political issue for Norwich that we wanted them to be aware of, and so they were gracious enough to show concern with respect to the Norwich tax situation. So it was a factor actually this year.
Yeah, and there were a couple of years ago where, again, I remember that the Dresden board was also made aware that our colleagues in Norwich were right up against that, and it's something that we need to pay attention to, because again, we need support from both communities if we're going to see our budget pass. And
now I know so Dresden is still affected by Act 60, even though it's an interstate school district.
It's affected to the extent that Norwich voters are going to be sensitive to it, and it's
Okay.
Norwich voters that vote for our budget.
Right. So that would definitely affect it. And also, what about the New Hampshire law? Is there a law?
We have no equivalent.
You have no equivalent. I don't think
No.
anybody else has any equivalent in that either. He's giving me a signal here. A couple of questions before we start ending this. Looking forward to the next few years. Obviously, the budget is going to be a process coming up. And what type of new other things are happening in Dresden, Hanover High School, Virtual School, the Dresden District that you should let us know about?
Well, I guess, I mean, just in terms of things that would have budgetary impacts? Well,
Curriculum, anything. Here's a chance to pat yourself on the back, not you, but the school, of what you're doing, because, I think it's important because we talked about, too, with Ann, Day, and Carrie last time, does being in the school board make a difference? A lot of times people think, well, I'm going up there and I'm going to, for quote unquote, lower teacher salary. I'm going to make sure we have higher class with no degree, But you get on the board and, you sort of become, but then you feel, well, I can make changes, not necessarily that way, but changes in curriculum, changes in the way the way you do education. I mean, you all are dedicated, you spend a number of hours every night for the fantastic pay of $100 or something like that, and in numerous committees, and people calling you, I'm sure, and so here's a chance to say what are the important things about that you like being in a school board, and what you think drives.
Right, and I have to say, things happen somewhat slowly, but looking over everything that's changed since I first got on the board, there's quite a few items, so it does make a difference. One of the things that we've worked on for a number of years that I think we're starting to see fruition in is the more rigorous evaluation of staff. And making sure, again, that we're delivering this quality educational program to each and every student by having a teacher in each classroom that is really performing at the best of his or her art. And that's what we really want to accomplish with evaluations, and we're now having a system in place. So I think that's really important.
And I think next year we've taken what has been a senior administrative position that combines both special education and curriculum development, and we're going to have two directors, one a director of curriculum instruction and assessment, and the other director of special education. So that will effectively add a lot more capacity to deal with curriculum instruction and assessment, which has kind of gotten short shrift because the special education's been so all-absorbing for the individual involved there. So that additional resource focused on the curriculum could be very, very important, because we probably haven't spent as much time there as an organization as we would have liked in the past. And I think, especially together with the technology, what's changing, that's really important. What happens there next year.
And one other question that I sort of should have asked for that, but when you talk about numbers, it sounds like you're, Hanover, Hartford, everybody wants tuition students. I mean, I'm sure everybody loves to see all the Heartland students come to Hanover, or the Piermont students, or the Lyme students, but they have school choice. So, so how do you try to attract more tuition students to come to Hanover? I mean, obviously, education costs and everything's going to be involved in their decision.
Well, one of the areas that is sort of opening up new to schools is the ability to attract international students who pay tuition. And so that is something that we've become qualified to participate in. And then this past week or month anyway, for example, we had a number of Chinese students come for a week-long exchange. And while there is no tuition there, it is a way of building relationships in another country where there may be an interest in having the opportunity to have their students be exchange students in the United States. So it's an area that we haven't really pursued before, but a new one.
I believe Thepford Academy have foreign stations come a lot to, I don't know how many, but I read an article in the paper that says a lot of foreign stations come there.
Right.
But with respect to the neighboring towns, We have over 100 students from neighboring towns. First and foremost Lyme, which it's a large number, but Heartland and some other towns, and it's an important part of the school system. We really, the two towns that form the core of the district benefit from having more students, and hopefully those towns and those students benefit as well. So I think it's incumbent upon us to just maintain the quality of the offering and to improve the quality that is already attracting them, and to continue to work on that quality.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being on the show, and I just want to review with you the dates. People should be aware. First of all, you can attend the Dresden School Board meeting anytime you want. They're held on the fourth Tuesday normally during the year, unless it's vacation week, or during January, where they're held 3 times a week. And they're mainly in the library, but once in a while you do cross the river, go to Norwich, and have the meetings over there. So you get on the SAU 70 website, you check the meeting dates. They would love to see you come to the meetings, give input. I've attended some meetings, they do listen. They do give it, both the Norwich board here and the cross school, and I'm sure the Hanover board as well would take an input for anything from there. Please email them, get the email from the SAU, and give the input. They're sure that you would love to hear input from the public. And then the dates for remembering are March 1st is the Dresden informational meeting, 7:30, 7 o'clock at Hanover High School auditorium.
Yes.
March 3rd at 10 o'clock.
No, it's 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock at the Hanover High School auditorium.
Yes.
Is the Hanover School District, which is mainly the Ray School.
Yes.
And on March 5th is the Norwich School Board meeting along with the Norwich Town meeting, and they're back-to-back, and the Norwich Town goes first, and so the school board will be there a little bit longer. And they're voting all day at the Hanover High School gym and in Tracy Hall from 7 to 7 to let you know that the old tradition is the Dresden budget voting is done separately. No color coordinated, they don't know who, and they put them all together, they mix them all together, so you can't tell if a Norwich or Hanover resident voted yes or no on the budget. Right. So those are key dates to remember. Please come out to vote because it's very important, even though in Norwich no one's running for a competition for us, still you can vote yes or no on them, or you can also vote on budget. There's a lot more issues in each town to vote on. Mm-hmm. And then just to clarify for everybody, because you heard me talk about the Norwich Town meeting, the Hanover Town meeting is held later they're on a different calendar year, in May. So again, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for watching the CATV show, and we'll see you at the polls.